In John Eustace's stint at Derby County as a player, he was part of the 13-14 side that played absolutely sumptuous football. Initially under Nigel Clough, although they parted company with him that season early on, and then under Steve McLaren. And I always think of the 5-1, I think it was, aggregate victory over Brighton in the playoff semi-final that season, where Derby County played just unbelievable football in that 4-3-3 that Steve McLaren built. And it looked like a team that had a clear playing identity 11 years ago, and a club that was financially responsible, it seemed at the time, and was really on an upward trajectory. But then Derby County lost 1-0 to QPR in the playoff final, absolutely robbed that day as well. And that preceded a series of challenges for the club. Firstly, an era of overspending to try and achieve short-term aims, which was to get to the Championship, which after a number of failed attempts, culminating in, I suppose, the defeat to Aston Villa at Wembley in 2019, it precipitated an era of financial decline, and Derby County dropped down to League One and were even on the brink of serious, possibly administration or liquidation and serious financial problems. Thankfully, David Clowes, a Derby County fan, a local businessman, stepped in 2022 and that's definitely saved the club. And he was a bit of a reluctant saviour for Derby County in many respects, but David Clowes has certainly saved the ship after promotion pushes in League One under Paul Warne that was ultimately successful the second time around. But then Warne obviously was dismissed last season and replaced by John Eustace, who helped Derby County escape from trouble with some good form towards the back end of the campaign. But I think that Derby County are still in a place of healing. They're still in a place of stabilisation from the issues that have gone before, when you think that the state the club was in exactly three years ago. But they do have cause for optimism, because John Eustace has proven to be a reliable Championship manager. He did great work at Birmingham City. He did great work at Blackburn Rovers, and he's shown signs of being able to build a team that can compete for the playoffs on a low budget without a huge amount of financial or infrastructural support. And that's what he'll be trying to do at Pride Park. So can Derby County work their way back towards becoming a good team in the Championship with a clear playing identity and moving in the right direction? Well, that's the idea, at least. Let's discuss whether they're up to bringing back the good times in this summer deep dive. Yes, welcome back to EFL Debate. I'm speaking to a fan of each of the 72 clubs across the EFL between mid-June and mid-July. So if you want more of that content, you can do us a massive favour by getting subscribed to us on YouTube and on Spotify. Delighted to be joined by Jack Bryan from Rams Review this morning. Jack, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time, mate. How do you feel about the position that Derby County's in at the moment as they look to try and stabilise at least in the Championship, first and foremost?
I think the sense is optimism, which I think there was a sense of this time last year, but it was tinged with realism and looking at Paul Warne's previous Championship record. I think now it's a genuine excitement that comes with that belief. I've said it a million times, but John Eustace brought the belief back to Derby County in the final 3 months of last season. And yeah, this is now, they've stabilised somewhat by getting another Championship season and kind of ensuring that financially and so on. But this is the moment to really properly stabilise, and if they stay up this year, you start to look at them as an established Championship club again. So I think that's what we're playing for this year. But yeah, no, I think it's really exciting. I mean, I'll give you a couple of numbers here. Across John Eustace's 14 league games in charge, Derby's points per game was 1.5, which over the course of the season was level with Coventry, who finished in the playoffs. If you take those 3 losses at the start out, they would have, over the course of a season, if they're formed for the final 11 games, which saw them go from 7 points adrift to safe, they would have finished 4th. Not saying that's what's going to happen, But it shows you what a job John Eustace did and why people are so hopeful.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think I wanted to look at, we'll certainly talk about John Eustace in more detail very shortly, but I wanted to talk about where the club's at structurally, because it's felt in previous conversations with you, Jack, like the club has been in a bit of a hand-to-mouth position where it's almost some of the long-term plans have kind of gone to the back burner a little bit because the club's been wanting to address some of the short-term challenges. I'm wondering, with David Clowes as owner, whether gradually some of those long-term objectives are coming back into view a little bit.
I think so, yeah. I mean, obviously, initially it was under his tenure. First season was just get a squad together. You think they started pre-season with Liam Rossini in interim charge with 5 contracted players. Paul Ward's first full season, the promotion season, was all about just getting promoted. And then last season was stay up at all costs. Now this is about slowly starting to build, as you say, becoming that solid championship club, being a good side for the division. And I think gradually building the club back up now is something that's very much starting to come into play. We know that David Clowes is open to investment, but even in the interim, they are changing things like the academy structure. They've brought in a B team model as well as the under 21s and under 18s. These shifts are being seen. There's more changes behind the scenes where Lee Bromby is currently interim head of recruitment. But there's shifts there with the non-playing stuff. Obviously, we have the cricket guys, Ed Smith and Mo Boback, come in last year, and that's being built upon with the data and everything behind the scenes. They are starting to build things out and kind of really develop that infrastructure. Really significant news as well that people may or may not be aware of. The pitch has been relayed at Pride Park. So that's, if anyone watched the game towards the end of last season, then yeah, you'll know how needed that was. So things like that being able to happen are definitely significant as well, because there was a time with administration and things like that where the pitch was a state and they couldn't really afford to do anything about it. I mean, I go back to 2020-21 season and Christian Bielik during his first ACL. Many people believed that a contributing factor to that was the pitch, the state of the pitch. But Mel Morris didn't have the money to put in to restore it from the sounds of things at the time. You would hope that things like that are very much a thing of the past now.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case. Do you think that David Clowes sees his long-term future as Derby County owner, Jack? Because I definitely got the impression that when he first took charge, it was literally just nobody else wants to take on the burden of this debt and all these problems. It's got to be me kind of thing. He's had to step up and be the hero of the hour. But that doesn't mean that he actively wants to be Derby County's owner for at that time, at least, for a number of years. But I'm wondering, 3 years into his tenure now, how do you think his position has changed? Do you think he's starting to think, you know what, I wasn't going to be here for the long term, but actually I'm enjoying being Derby County owner. I'm glad to be able to help the club, and while there isn't a better offer, I'm happy to be a safe pair of hands.
Yeah, so I think if you look at why he came in the first place, there'd already been talks around the stadium for Clowes Development's portfolio. If they needed to be part of that with any other potential buyer for the club, and then it got to a point where, as you say, there was literally nobody else. I think we forget just how close this was run. Actually, you were talking a small number of days at best, and it has been about being that custodian, really, that reluctant owner. But I think as part of that custodian role, he's very conscious of passing the baton to the right person. And I think that's why, investment things first came out from local media in September of last year. There is, as of yet, no investment. A couple of names bandied about on social media, but nothing in the press even, so nothing concrete enough to be reported. And I I think obviously part of that was always going to be that investors are going to want to know what division the club are going to be in for the following season. But yeah, I think from what was reported at the time, David Klaus wasn't going to give up all of his stake. He was ideally looking for minority investment, if I remember rightly, but was open to a majority, with him keeping an element of it. So yeah, I think his role has now changed to ensuring he's that custodian. Even when the baton is passed, he's going to want to be 100% sure that they don't end up back in the same pickle that they're in 3-4 years ago, because frankly, he won't want to step in and spend another 50 million to save them again.
Yeah, if you can avoid it, that's rather a lot, isn't it? In terms of let's talk about John Eustace then, Jack, because one of the big things that stood out to me, I think we're in an era of football, right, where a lot of the technical side of management is analysed sometimes to the nth degree, and a lot of emphasis is put on the technical and tactical side of it. But I still think that people management is a huge part of the job. And one thing John Eustace did brilliantly at Birmingham City and Blackburn Rovers is really good man management in terms of the dressing room and keeping a happy ship, but also relationship with the fans. John Eustace's passion really comes across, but not. Also, he's not passionate in the way of, how Nathan Jones is, like chest beating, and some of it's for kind of for effect, if you like. I think John Eustace is also really down to earth as well. So I think he's just such a likable person, and I think the fan base is just like, yes, that's my guy. We're going to go with him. And I think that's been the case at Birmingham City. It's been the case at Blackburn Rovers, and probably now the case at Derby County as well.
Yeah, I mean, go back to February, and there had been chants about Paul Warne that, quite frankly, I can't repeat on here. Within 2 weeks, John Eustace was appointed, even with that Friday night loss at QPR. There was a sense for his press conference and his unveiling, and also just his post-match interview that night, a sense from fans that it just clicked. He just got them, they just got him. And I think it helped that we've all seen him before, seen his passion as a player, and everyone loved the Eustace in midfield as well at that, a decade earlier. So the turnaround was pretty quick, and that shows you just how good he is at that. I think, yeah, it's massive in terms of that man management, and also in terms of expectations, I think, as well. So he has that passion, but it's measured.
Yes, yeah, 100%.
And I think that's key. He's not going to get too high or too low, but that whatever the situation, he cares 110%. And I think that kind of understated, calm nature is a hallmark of why he got Derby out of the situation that they were in. I mean, in terms of that man management, we've seen it with the players, and I mean, just to give you a bit of insight. I mean, I've been in a couple of his press conferences, post-match presses.
Oh, you're getting big time now, Jack.
Yeah, the first one I was in, I should say as well, because Chris will like this if I do this. Shout out to the University of Derby's football journalism course.
Oh, absolutely, it's the best.
But yeah, no. So the first one I was in was after the win over Coventry. So that was a big game, second of the 3 straight wins before the March international break, to kind of really galvanise the squad and the club and the fan base in the fight for survival. And I managed to get a question in, and I just thought, why not? But I think it was obvious that I was a nervous student in my first press conference. But John Eustace could sense that. Looking back on it, he could sense that. He gave me, I could take my time, and then I went to get my phone off the desk afterwards because you're recording these things. And he just turns to me and says, "Great question, that mate. Great question."
Oh, brilliant. What was it you asked him out of interest?
Pardon?
What was it you asked him?
So I asked him, so that game we saw Kane Wilson had returned in the previous game and then wasn't fit for that one. So Ryan Andy was back at right wing back. And I asked him about Evo Adams. For some reason, had picked up a wider role. He was drifted out to the right. And I just asked him about that because that to me was quite a clear tweak because of the lack of Kane Wilson, Evo Adams taking up those positions because they have these run as far forward. So I went tactical. I went really nerdy.
Yeah.
It helped that I had a great view of it from where I was sat for the second goal early in the second half. But you know, so yeah, no, but just one of those moments where I thought, yeah, you just kind of know how to make people tick, don't you?
Yeah.
If you're doing that in your post-match presser with nervous students, that just shone through to me the sort of character he is.
Brilliant. Yeah. And that doesn't surprise me at all because he does seem to be very very humble and very down to earth. Because I think some managers, I mean, I've like you been lucky enough to go into different press conferences and things like that. And I think sometimes you definitely come across some managers who are a bit different to that, a bit more reluctant to engage with new digital journalists, with new people, you know, in that kind of area. So the fact that John Eustace was willing to get to take that time and be like that with you, I think speaks well, reflects really well on him. Let's have a look at the squad then, Jack, because I wanted to look at the goalkeeping department where you've got Jakob Vidal Zetterstrom. Just talk to me about a good first season he had with Derby County.
Yeah, obviously cut short at the very end to the final, 3 games due to a fractured eye socket. And otherwise, though, very solid first year. Fans seem to love him. The question marks were over his distribution. That got a heck of a lot better once Paul Clements came in, about a week after John Eustace as the new goalkeeping coach. He is very, very highly rated, I have to say, the goalkeeping coach, and I think that will continue to make a difference. But yeah, Zetterstrom, one of those very kind of charismatic characters, but also, you know, he's made some worldy saves, and I think he will continue to develop. There was at one point when he was at Djurgården a little bit Premier League interest. I think the distribution is probably the thing that stopped that from going through. If that continues, then yeah, I could see him having a top season for for the championship. And I think he's a very safe pair of hands that yeah, I think there's confidence in him. He's an assured goalkeeper now, bedding in after a season. And I should say as well, Derby's kind of community champion. He won one of the awards the other day for some great work within the community in Derby. So that just reflects on how well he's settled in to the club and the city in the past year as well.
Absolutely. That sort of thing can be as important as what's going on the pitch at times, can't it? If somebody's willing to chip in and help the community. You've also got Josh Vickers, who I know is a very talented goalkeeper as well, or certainly he's more of a sort of peak age, I guess, goalkeeper now. So talk to me about Josh Vickers, and I guess is it going to be tough for him if Zetterstrom stays to get the minutes he'd be looking for?
It will, but if you look at what happened last season, when required, he stepped up. So the opening night against, ironically, John Eustace's Blackburn didn't go too well for him, conceded 4. But after that, there was that great display in the 1-0 smash and grab, really, at home to Middlesbrough. And then, actually, it was final 4 games, wasn't it, I think, of the season where he had to step in. Luton, he didn't have much to do other than the goal, and then good performances in those final 3. West Brom away to Hull, and then Stoke ended up on the final day being a little bit of a dead rubber. I've probably spent more time watching West Brom Luton, to be honest, because that's what decided it. But whenever he's been called upon, he's proved himself to be a solid goalkeeper. Whether he wants more football and would, drop down to League One perhaps to be a regular number one, that would be the risk from Derby's side, because I think to have a number two who can step in and step up when required is invaluable. And he certainly did that last year. But I think, it's probably going to be a struggle for him to dislodge Zetterstrom.
Yeah, I think the other factor is he spent a large period of his career in more recent years. Although I think he came through at Arsenal, didn't he, and spent some time at Barnet at the start of his career. More recently, he's been in either Yorkshire, I think, or Derbyshire. So whether he'd want to relocate, I think that could be another factor at play. And then I suppose you've signed Richard O'Donnell, who I imagine has been signed just as that insurance, I guess, if Zetterstrom leaves and Vickers becomes number one. If Vickers wants first team football, you've got Richard O'Donnell, who's an experienced Football League goalkeeper. Not sure a huge amount more needs to be said about that signing, but I can see the logic to it. I wanted to move on to the defence because you mentioned, Jack, off air that although it was a 3-5-2 that was the formation that kept Derby up in the last third of last season, certainly with the intention to solidify, John Eustace wants to go back to 4-2-3-1 this season.
Yeah, he said this in the fans forum nearly 2 weeks ago, Pride Park, with Rams TV's own Bradley and CEO Stephen Pearce. And I think, it was somewhat expected, because I think the shift we'll see from Derby is now trying to play that bit more. I was speaking to Albion Analysis about Nat Phillips signing for West Brom the other week, and they were asking me about his lack of numbers in terms of kind of in possession work. And I think that reflected across the whole team. I kind of took a look back on that after that, and I thought, but you look at the Paul Warne team, they don't really try to play. John Eustace couldn't really afford to. They just had to grind out the results. I think we'll see a shift in that now. Because I think certainly at home, I want to play a bit more on the front foot. But I think if it goes wrong, if it doesn't work out, to have this really solid 3-5-2 where they can get results, they can D in, and, as I say, just grind out points is going to be massive. So I think they keep that up their sleeve. But he wants to try and be, I think, a little bit more expansive in the 4-2-3-1 that he's historically favoured. So.
Although, Jack, I think with that, in terms of style, I think it's I think a John Eustace side is going to want to play good football in the opposition half when the ball's there, but I don't know that he's necessarily going to be play out from the back loads. I think when he was Birmingham City manager, you saw we'd go forward early, but then sometimes on the second balls, then we'd play a bit of football through midfield. But it wasn't like we'd play a lot of football in terms of out from the back. So I think what I reckon, because the problem with the 3-5-2 is that if you've got three defenders back, it's not necessarily a great formation for pressing. Whereas the 4-2-3-1, you've possibly got a 4-man attack rather than 2-man. So that means that you can get a lot more aggression against the ball. And I imagine that's the idea behind the formation change.
Yeah, I mean, when I say more expansive, that's relative to what we saw last season, which was an incredibly low bar with Paul Ward. And then, as I say, necessarily so for John Eustace. I think, Matt Clark has some abilities on the ball, but as you say, I think really it will be into that midfield. They'll want to recruit somebody to kind of control the play, to kind of dictate and, play next to an Ego Adams or a Liam Thompson. But I think having that 4 is a really important point for the press, but also the way Derby built up, because in their best performances in that sort of 3-5-2, they still sort of formed some sort of weird front 4 where you would have Marcus Harness on paper as a striker, dropping in and dropping slightly off to the left. You'd have Ego Adams drifting out to the right to add an extra man. Then you'd have Harrison Armstrong running in as well. And then you've got Jerry Yates up top still. So they still liked to form a sort of front 4. And I think to do that in a more orthodox way in the 4-2-3-1 will make more sense for John Eustace. And I think now that he can recruit for it rather than having to just really work with what he's got, that will be big. But yeah, I'd imagine, as I say, Zetterström's distribution getting better will certainly help with this as well. But I think a lot of Derby getting up the pitch will be, as you say, getting it that bit further forward and then having a driving run, either from an Emo Adams through the middle with sheer power, or a good dribble from someone like Kane Wilson, who, I mean, he did some great stuff on a very bobbly pitch towards the end of last season in terms of those runs and holding off defenders. I would think he's going to have a much better time with it on a new pitch as well. So,
yeah, I agree. He's always been, if I look back at Kane Wilson's career, even before his value shot up from his time at Forest Green, I always thought of him as a kind of a technical fullback or wingback who likes to link up play and get involved that way, rather than somebody who's super athletic who likes to knock the ball ahead of himself and just run onto it. I wouldn't say that's really Kane Wilson's game. So I think in possibly a more expansive team and maybe on a smoother pitch, hopefully we'll see a better Kane Wilson. So I think that's something to be really excited about.
Yeah, 100%. I think, it's going to be fascinating to see just how they adapt. But he is someone who should benefit massively, because, I mean, you saw his impact when he came back. You look at the run of games that I was talking about before, when they got the 3 straight wins before the international break. I don't think it's that much coincidence that first game of that run was when he came back, and say missed that Coventry game with injury. Then he was back in the team from there, and I think having that outlet was a huge element of that team. So I think whether they'll want somebody with the ability to be a bit more of an outlet on the left as well, just for options, rather than an injury-prone Callum Elder or a 36-year-old Craig Forsyth. I think there'll be a left back coming in, let's just say. But yeah, no, I think it'll certainly favour people like him, and I think someone like Andy Byron as well coming in is to add that bit of know-how, that bit of technique in the final third, on top of the physicality that we've seen kind of up top with your Carlton Morris coming in, Lars Jørgen Salverson, and so on.
Just finally on Kane Wilson, before we move on, do you think he's going to be good enough defensively to play right back in a 4 at this level?
It will depend how they shape the system, I think. I think if you give him license and you can sort of have a different in-possession structure, if you've got a defensively solid left back and you want to go to a 3, then great. Or if you have a kind of holding midfielder drop in. The other thing that I still think could happen with a good 10 who wants to be relatively attacking is, I don't think it's out of the question that we see him further forward, purely because of Ryan Nyambe when he's fit, but also the amount of links we've seen to right backs for Derby over the past month or so. So I don't think that's out of the question. I think that's something they would look at. But yeah, no, I think defensively it's something that I know they want to work on as well. John Eustace said this towards the back end of last season, that he had liked Kane Wilson all the way back when he was at Kidderminster Harriers, started his managerial career. He tried to bring him in, and certainly improving his all-round game, and that bit defensively as well is part of it. But I think we did see an improvement over the last couple of months of the season, just in that work rate and that kind of reading of the games, getting to the right positions. With a full pre-season of training, that will hopefully improve. I mean, we know John Eustace likes an individual development plan for every player. If he is going to play Kane Wilson at right back in that 4, then there will be focus on his defensive awareness and positioning and so on.
Yeah, that's going to be an important position, I think, because you've also got Ryan Nyambe there, who I think definitely has a lower ceiling than Kane Wilson, because he's not going to give you the same quality going forward. But he has probably got a higher floor, because in terms of reliability in defending, Ryan Nyambe, isn't going to get beaten one-on-one defensively, because he's quick and strong. And I think he actually was somebody who could play right centre half in a back 3 if you want to go with that formation. So he's more of a solid option, I guess, Ryan Niambe.
Yeah, Smith's dependable, really. When he's fit, he's the sort of 7 out of 10 every week type player. Probably aside from that game at QPR last season, I don't think I saw him put in a particularly bad performance. I think people said at the start of last season he was the best 1v1 defender at the club. I think even with the signings, he's probably still up there. And that dynamic of him kind of on the right of the back three with Kane Wilson as a wing back could be really interesting still. I don't think we got to see much of that towards the back end of last season. But I think if they can have that sort of dynamic, that's where I do wonder about even having Kane Wilson further forward, Nyambe at right back, and sort of dropping into that shape when needed if they have a very attack-minded 10, which someone like Andy Ryman, who can also play up front, would be. So I think there's definitely options for John Eustace there. But I would say it might depend on the opponent and the game as to who starts there, based on what I've seen last season. And that's kind of how it often operated under Paul Ward as well. But yeah, no, he, as I say, has had his injury problems, but when fit, he's somebody that you're always just relatively confident in. He's going to have a solid game.
I think that idea of converting Kane Wilson into a winger could have legs because the other reason in favour of Nyambe as a right back, presuming it's a 4, which you've alluded to, I think is because if we're playing Matt Clark as left centre half, you're having Danny Bart as right centre half possibly. And that would mean that if you've got a really attacking right back who isn't as reliable defensively, Danny Bart is going to get caught in those 1v1 duels, which isn't going to play to his strengths because he's a 35-year-old centre half and he's not very quick. And you much want him in more central areas with good protection on the outside. Whereas if it's Ryan Nyambe there, he's going to deal with all those 1v1s in wide areas, and Danny Bart can sleep easily, knowing he can or rest easily, knowing he can only has to head balls out of the box and organise people. So I think maybe that argument in favour of Nyambe would work for Danny Bart because I think he would have that protection.
Yeah, by contrast, Sondre Langås, I would say, is very quick. The Norwegian centre back they signed in January. He was probably the quickest. Well, he was the quickest defender in the team still, even when he played the last couple of months of the season with a torn meniscus. We know he's got to be back for the start of the season. But yeah, he's rapid. Having him covering at right centre back for Kane Wilson when he goes forward probably would work. But I think that pace might also help someone like Danny Bart, who is a bit more a head it, kick it type defender from the Blackburn people I've spoken to, and doesn't have that pace. If you've got a young guy who's still looking to develop, who has that experience alongside him, that partnership could work. Yeah, I feel like he could cover for someone like Kane Wilson, but Danny Bart, yeah, you're right to say you probably want a Ryan Nyambe next to him.
Yeah, hopefully Sondre Langås can show that pace in recovery, and that could be a big asset for Derby County this season. I wanted to ask you about Matt Clark and the difference he made after joining on loan from, or was it permanently from Middlesbrough in January last season?
Yeah, I mean, big difference. Just a leader again at the back, someone to organise the back line. He came in on technically a permanent deal on a contract to the end of the season. So, I mean, permanent feels like a little bit of an oxymoron, doesn't it? But the understanding was always that if they stayed off, he was likely to sign, and he has done. Just really assured on the left side of the back three, kind of rediscovered some of that form that saw him be Derby's player of the season in 2019-20, I would say. And, I think back to after his first game, he got wheeled out in front of the local media. He did the post-match interviews on the radio and so on. And that was him in his first game. He's been asked all these difficult questions about the form. It's not really anything to do with him. He's just arrived. But there he is, talking about that. And I remember a moment where he was asked about the game plan and he just looked a little bit blank. I think, that was the back end of the Paul Ward era. I think he's someone that's been central to the plan that John Eustace then built, because there was a very, very solid foundation in that back three with him, Phillips, and Sanjay Langas. So, a massive difference. And as I say, he's someone that is being a left footer. I think that's big for dynamics. Obviously, it's cash-in replacement in that respect at that time. But also, someone relatively comfortable on the ball was definitely an attribute that Derby needed in that back line, because you kind of had Phillips as the physical kind of colossus, Langus with the pace, and then Clark with a bit of a mixture of that kind of physical authority, but also that bit more composure in possession, I'd say, as well.
Yeah, he's always been a very progressive defender at this level as well, and has that ball playing aspect. So I think that's going to be a big asset for Derby County. In terms of left back, then I think with Craig Forsyth, I think you have to give him some credit in terms of finishing last season. Came up with some important goals, didn't he? I feel a little bit like Forsyth had his best season for Derby County 11 years ago. And so there's part of me that sort of feels like if the club was in a different position off the field, would he still be an integral part of the squad?
Yeah, I mean, he had a good end to the season. He had, in that 4-game winning streak, he scored 2 goals from the left side of the back three. And then he ended up back at wing back, put a shift in. He's an ultimate professional, really. It's a new 2-year deal, which I know has raised eyebrows, certainly, like that. But I think, one of the key things with this deal is that the club are helping him towards his coaching badges. So I think John Eustace felt that he had earned the right to stay around, given the way he finished the season, but also that he wanted someone with that experience and that sort of character in the squad. If you look at what he did in terms of the free agents he brought in, it was experienced heads that didn't really play, but he credits them with having made a difference. Your Eric Peters and your Kemar Roofs and Jeff Hendricks. So I wonder whether he's going to have more of a bit part role, be around the squad as a leader, somebody, as I say, Eustace likes, Eustace thinks highly of, and wants to keep around in that respect. He gets his badges and potentially moves into a coaching role down the line. I think the other thing to factor in now is this new B team model. I think there'll be games for experienced players on the fringes to go and play in that team to help the youngsters that are making that transition from the under-21s to the first team. And even if he has a bit of a role to play this season in the first team squad, whilst doing badges and whatever, certainly for the second year of that deal, that's kind of the thing that I can see that maybe softens the bafflement of that 2-year deal, that perhaps it's part of that role, because I don't imagine he's going to be on a stupid wage. It's a man who bleeds black and white at this point and will, want to stick around.
Yeah, absolutely, and good luck to Fozzie in terms of going into coaching and everything. I'm sure he'll be very successful at that, because he has been, as much as I do have certain frustrations with him, and there's part of me that feels like you'd want to move on from him from a playing point of view. I also would have to acknowledge that he is, like you mentioned, a consummate professional and can set a great example to younger players. So certainly in the dressing room, I think we can agree he can play a massive part next season. In terms of left, so go on, Jack.
Hello, sorry. It's I think that's the thing, and whether he takes on one of those sorts of roles, I think that's what I'm envisaging, because I would hope that there will be more. As you say, should Derby need to rely on a 36-year-old who's been around the block with the club and so on, but then at the same time, every time a left back comes in over the last decade, you've thought, right, Craig Forsyth is going to be the backup now. Every time he finds his way back in, so whoever he signs, expect them to be on the bench by the end of the season with Craig Forsyth still starting.
He keeps fighting back. Maybe in 2030 he's going to be 41 and he's still doing it. Yeah. In terms of the other left back option you've got at the moment is Callum Elder, Jack. Obviously he's shown a lot of potential early in his career with Peterborough United, but he's also, I think his chance is he's been hindered a lot by injuries, which felt like a sort of a recurring theme for Callum Elder. So is it a case of managing his minutes next season?
Probably, yeah. Based on what we saw last season, he put in some really good performances. I think after a difficult first season, there were concerns about going into the season with him and Forsyth as the two left backs. He stepped up when needed with some good displays, but yeah, definitely fitness and injuries and managing minutes is the concern there, and part of the reason I definitely expect somebody to come in at left back. He's not bad for a team where Derby are in Championship, but for kicking on, you want somebody who can do that and maybe a little bit more every week. So I think, good backup option for where Derby want to be, but given his fitness concerns, yeah, I'd say you want someone else in there to rotate.
So let's have a look at the midfield then, Jack, because you've got Kenzo Goodmine, who's one that I'm quite excited about, actually, because as much as he had some really nice moments last season, many of his moments, was getting neck ache from looking at the ball going over his head, and it probably didn't always play into his strengths. And while he did offer that little bit of extra quality and composure in midfield that have maybe been missing it in other areas, I'm quite hopeful that under John Eustace, you might get a Matt Clark playing the ball into him a bit more, or conversely, you might say, the early balls will go straight to Carlton Morris, but then the knockdowns or then the second balls will go to Kenzo Goodman, and you can play a bit of football. So I think Kenzo Goodman had a 6 or 7 out of 10 last season. I think there's potential for him to move more to an 8 this year.
Yeah, I think he's been doing some more like gym work as well. I think that was one of the things with his stature adapting to the league. But yeah, certainly there's a lot of technical quality there, and the kind of hoofball didn't suit him. I know some fans have made a lot of the fact that he wasn't utilised that heavily by John Eustace either. But again, I think that was relative to the style of play that Derby had to deploy. I think the 4-2-3-1.
And sorry, Jack, also the form of Harrison Armstrong possibly in the second half of last season fed into that as well.
Oh, 100%. He was stellar, and I am sure Derby would have him back in a heartbeat. Whether that will happen or not, but yeah, it's something that he can come into this team. Maybe that 10 role kind of favours him a bit more as well than a sort of deeper role in a 3-5-2. So that could be interesting for Kenzo. But yeah, clearly a very, very technically talented player. And you could sense his frustration at times last season, where, as you say, he was getting neck ache. I don't know if you've seen the tweets about him and Carlton Morris.
They look quite similar, yeah.
Yeah, Derby, fair play to the social media team for playing on that a couple of weeks ago on Morris' side. But yeah, I think if he's playing just behind Carlton Morris, then, well, thank goodness for shirt numbers. But yeah, no, I think he can have an exciting year with a team that want more of the ball and will, as you said, play the ball to his feet. If he can get the ball at his feet, he can make things happen. We just didn't see that very much last year because, as you say, hoofing it over him. So I think physically, if he developed that bit more, he's got the quality. He is one of those players that just has that extra sprinkle of magic in his boots, really. And that's something that you don't see in that many places in this Derby squad.
Yeah, let's hope that's the case. I would personally see him rather than as a 10. I think I would like the idea of him getting on the ball a bit more in possibly a deeper role. But I think in terms of that 4-2-3-1, in terms of that double pivot, at the moment, I suppose the options you've got are, because I think Ebou Adams would be a 10. So therefore, you've got Ben
very
Osborne.
possible.
So go on.
Yeah, it's very possible that we see even higher up, to be honest, because we saw that kind of in the 3-5-2 as well, where he was the one further up to sort of lead that press. And the other thing that John Eustace told me about that was, they needed ways to score goals, and maybe it was a little bit unorthodox. People hadn't seen it coming with Adams, who had always been that kind of tough tackling midfielder, great numbers for tackles and interceptions, but actually pressing from the front and also just his pace and power to help Derby up the pitch was what was massive. So if you've got him doing that and then Kenzo pulling the strings behind, that could, as you say, work really well as well. I think, the only thing I base the 10 on is kind of where he's played previously. He's certainly, if I go back to his loan at Excelsior in the Netherlands, on loan from Arsene, he played that deeper role. Yeah, that deep line playmaker and trying to do something like what Armstrong did could definitely work, because either they be that 10 sort of lead things. If that does happen, I don't think he'll be afraid to drop in deeper to that midfield and put a tackle in or try and intercept something, and then that maybe gives Kenzo license to roam that bit more. But if you give him that roaming role from slightly deeper, get him on the ball, there's going to be, with Ebou Adams, there's enough legs in that team to cover wherever Kenzo might end up.
Yeah, 100%. Because I think you want Adams furthest forward against the ball and being really aggressive, because he's got the athleticism that's going to threaten teams. But then also, as play progresses, you want Kenzo Gudmine to sort of roam into those advanced areas as well, because that's where he can create. So I think that's really exciting. But I also feel, Jack, I don't know if you agree with me here, that Derby County are missing in their current squad that six, that player who can either just provide a bit of solidity in front of the defence, a bit like Eustace in his playing days, or kind of keep play ticking over, especially if you want somebody like Gudmine to have that creative license. Because you've got Ben Osborne, who I think is more of a dynamic midfielder who can also fill in out wide. You've got Darren Robinson, who's come in from the under-21s. But where do you think Liam Thompson is at in his development, and can he be that number 6?
I think he had a really good end to last season. If he carried that forward, potentially. Again, just given the number of players at present in that midfield area, I wouldn't be surprised to see one come in. I know there have been links to Lewis Travis, Stock, another Blackburn player. In fact, I saw someone the other day say that Derby are becoming black and white Burn Rovers. But it's something he's stuck around, and I'm glad he's stuck around, because great end to last season, and he's really good at just kind of being relentless, picking up those kind of lost causes as well, and surprisingly good in the air for someone so small. He seems to help Derby win a lot of second balls purely by kind of being a nuisance to opposition attackers who are trying to get on the end of a long ball, for example. But I would anticipate someone coming in, because Tomo, great option, full of energy, could definitely do a bit of what Adams does as well in that respect. We've seen him try to do that. But is he an out and out 6th? I'm not sure. I think we'll see as the season goes on. But I think Adams was the one kind of earmarked for that initially at the start of last season, based on how he played in League One. And as it's transpired, his talents are, as you say, probably more useful in a slightly more flexible, slightly more advanced role. So I anticipate a 6 to come in, because I think Thompson energetic, and then Osborne has got a lot of stick. He had his injury problems last year. To be honest, I think based on how he started, you saw a reading of the game that was clearly something that Derby wouldn't have had in League One. You saw that kind of footballing brain. With the injury issues and so on,
Which is
I
surprising
think,
for someone developed at Nottingham Forest.
well, you said it, but but no, I think I think you look at him and you think if they could sort the injury issues out, which hopefully they have, then he could be a good option, certainly to play as that kind of left-sided central midfielder, whether
Mm,
that is sitting slightly deeper and dictating then picking up a space like Kenzo. We saw him do that really well in a run in kind of December time when Derby went to Burnley, got a draw, thrashed Portsmouth, and then were really unfortunate with that late double salvo from Luton. Uh, but it's probably that managing minutes. He couldn't play more than a game a week for most of the season. But
mm,
I do think his experience, his know-how, and his nous could be an asset there. So
mm.
having someone like Liam Thompson next to him with energy, Evo Adams is definitely great there. But yeah, I would anticipate an out-and-out six coming in
Yeah,
because Liam Thompson is a little bit more of a Duracell body than he is an
right.
out-and-out six.
Yeah, it does seem like a common theme in this midfield. Lots of players with bags of energy. But I think it's possibly missing that experienced player who can just put their foot on a ball, break things up at times, but also just kind of keep a lid on the midfield and keep things ticking over. I think it's missing that kind of player.
Yeah,
Um,
you want, as you say, you want a John Eustace. You want someone to be a
yeah,
little bit of a midfield metronome, but also not afraid to get stuck in and just, Evo Adams, I imagine, will keep the captain's armband. He's done a good job leading, but you want probably another leader in there if you're going to bed somebody like Kenzo Halpern properly into the team for the year, or even a Liam Thompson who, you know, has thrived at times, thrived at the end of last season, thrived in administration as well, actually, under Wayne Rooney. But yeah, I think having that option there is as you say, massive. And I think Lewis Travis linked. I don't know if anything will come of that. That could easily just be paper talk, given the amount of Blackburn links there's been. But I could also see it. To be fair, I think that's
Although I also think Lewis Travis, although it would be a great signing in terms of quality, I think he's actually quite similar to the midfielders you've already got.
yeah,
It's more what you'd probably be looking for is somebody like the lad Tronstad alongside him,
yeah.
who is more of a sitter. And so, I don't think you'd necessarily get Tronstad, but I think somebody, if you could find somebody of that ilk, then I think that would make a difference.
Do you know what, Gav? I'm gonna ask you this.
Oh,
I'm
please.
thinking about realistic targets. What sort of player would you recommend? Would you be, if you were looking, say, to League One, for example, would you be looking there? Would you be looking abroad? Who would you be looking at for that with your in-depth knowledge of the EFL? I'm here to do Derby stuff. I've not looked beyond that.
Okay, let me get up League One because that helps me look at team names to see.
Yeah.
Okay, so Derby County. So you'd want, if you're recruiting somebody from League One, I think you'd want them to have a bit of growth potential, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
Um,
most
let
likely.
me see who's good in League One. Later, Jordan Brown's just gone to Blackpool. Exeter, but now we're bottom Wanderers, if they go Josh Sheehan. Luke O'Connell, I quite like at Barnsley. He
Yeah,
would probably be somebody out because I think he's got some potential. So somebody like Luke O'Connell possibly at Barnsley.
yeah. Yeah, that's fair. I think. Yeah, no, it is. I think that's going to be a key position. I think that's six. And I mean, so far looking through the team and looking at the kind of depth charts and so on, getting that out and out six and getting a left back
Mm,
are probably going to be the most important
mm.
pickups right now. So yeah, I just wonder. I wonder quite who it's going to be, but yeah, somebody in that Luke O'Connell profile makes sense actually.
Yeah. So we'll wait and see who they go for. In terms of the right wing, I think going to 4-2-3-1 would be a big plus for somebody like Corey Blackett-Taylor because he's not really a wing back, whereas I think he would prefer playing in a 4-2-3-1. What do you think this season could have in store for him?
It needs to go well, to be honest, doesn't it? He's been at the club 18 months,
Mm,
and it's just never really clicked. Uh, Again, he's had his injury problems. The system, rightly you allude to, he's not really one for a sort of 3-5-2. I don't know really where you play him in that. He's an out-and-out winger, really, in that sort of four at the back formation. So something like a 4-2-3-1 is massive for him. He's clearly got the ability to beat his man. He's got something I rave about with Kane Wilson is those progressive carries numbers. Corey Blackett-Taylor has very good numbers relative to the amount of minutes he played last season in that. So in terms of that, and again, getting Derby up the pitch and beating the man, and whether it's getting a cross into a big striker, be it a Carlton Morris and Lars Jørgen Salveson, or if you believe the rumours, even Patrick Agyemang from Charlotte FC. I think this will definitely favour him, and that sort of out and out winger is definitely going to be needed. I mean, there's a reason why Derby fans are dreaming of someone like Tyrese Dolan coming as well, just given the Eustace links. I think quality out wide will make this system tick, and yeah. At the moment, by my reckoning, he's the only in terms of wingers. You've got him, Jackson, Barkhausen, and Joe Ward, who I'm guessing in this we're classing as a winger because he's not really a right back.
Yeah,
I wouldn't play him as an out and out winger. So really,
I could, and also, sorry, Jack, I could also see Barkhausen being offloaded because I don't think he's good enough for the Championship now.
Yes, easily. That could easily happen. So in terms of players that I think will be around come the start of the season, Barkhausen I could see going. Joe Ward, I'm not sure about him either, whether he'll still be around.
He might go and follow Paul Warner at MK Dons or go back to Peterborough or something like that.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me because, again, he's somebody who, in League One, looked quite decent in the back 3/back 5 formation at wing back. But I think he is a wing back. I don't think he's a fullback or an out-and-out fullback or an out-and-out winger.
Yeah, well, he did play wide. He actually did play. So when Peterborough did play 4-2-3-1 in League One, he did play as a winger, but he more like a Milner type winger rather than an out-and-out winger, if you like. So again, I think it depends what you're looking for. So kind of like, you know how you might sometimes play Ben Osborne on the left side of midfield, but you wouldn't necessarily expect him to be a winger. That's the kind of thing you'd get from Joe Ward, I think. But yeah, again, I'm not sure he's Championship standard.
But yeah, so that basically points to me as two out-and-out wingers in the squad at the moment in Blackett-Taylor and Jackson that we think are likely to still be there come the end of the season. End of the transfer window, sorry. End of the season, I'm jumping months ahead. But yeah, so I think Corey Blackett-Taylor, as it stands, will get a chance, certainly throughout pre-season at least. And, you know, he had a great 6 months in League One before joining Derby with Charlton. He didn't really get that many opportunities once he signed, and then same again last season with the injuries. I think there's a player there. I think some of the underlying numbers in terms of some of those dribbles, beating his man, those progressive carries and things like that are good enough that it's worth a chance, and he could certainly be an asset. But again, I would imagine they're looking for somebody to come in. I know they spoke at the fans forum about having a couple of exciting wingers come in. They've got some good young prospects going forward that they're looking at and excited
well, I think
about.
it depends, Jack, as well, how you want your front four 4-2-3-1 to operate. Because I think Corey Blackett-Taylor, I think he can be a threat in 1v1s out wide because he does have that searing pace, which is a massive asset. However, if you want players who can combine and interchange as part of that front four, I don't think he's that guy. I think he can play can have an impact off the bench because that fresh legs is going to absolutely scare opponents. But I also think that in terms of the best 11, I'm not quite sure how he's going to fit into that.
Yeah, no, he's not the kind of fluid player that could be part of a rotating three behind a striker in a 4-2-3-1, for example.
Whereas somebody like Tyrese Dolan, I think, is.
Yes, exactly. And even someone like Andy Vyman was locked out on the wing at Derby in his previous spell. As he's admitted, wasn't his best position, didn't go all that well. I mean, I think really he was a shell of himself in his first spell at Derby compared to what we've seen elsewhere. But from the 10 or from a striker role, he could absolutely drift and rotate. we can absolutely see some of that link up from him. Someone like Blackett Taylor feels to me like just a run down the line type winger. And so for something like a 4-4-2, 4-3-3 as an out and out winger, but for those rotations, as you say, they're going to want somebody to be that bit more fluid, that bit more flexible, I think. So I think there's certainly a chance for him, as you say, as an impact sub, but I'm not sure he'll get a starting nod come the first game of the season, which is at Stoke.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think Weiman's strength, as well as that movement that he can provide as well, is probably his versatility in being able to play anywhere behind a main striker or even as a centre forward if you know, at a push as well. So that versatility could be valuable if you want to go quality over quantity. So Carlton Morris is signed then, Jack. I think if you can get good crosses into the box for him, I think he can carry a real threat.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a proper championship number 9, really, isn't he? Proper big, kind of target type striker that can hopefully help bring others into play as well. I think you didn't see the best of him at Luton last year. I think that's obvious to say. But look back at 11 Premier League goals, and his previous championship campaign as Luton went up 20 goals. Speaking to some Luton fans about him, I think they felt that the captain's armband was a bit of a burden on him, especially given his relationship with Tom Lockyer. And they kind of felt that the pressure maybe wasn't something that he thrived off, and in fact weighed him down a little. But I also think, having delved into some of the stats, if you look at his goal numbers last year, it's obviously a massive drop off from the previous championship campaign he had. But you see a similar drop off in his number of shots. So I think his conversion rate was actually relatively similar. It wasn't miles off. So I think a lot of it will be about service for him, and whether he can help then bring others into play as well, as I say, and help that link up for hopefully fairly dynamic front four will be big. But it feels like a little bit of a statement from Derby. In fact, the best comparisons, the most hopeful comparisons, we don't know what shirt number he's getting yet, but have been calling him CM9 compared to Chris Martin of a decade ago. So, if he could have that impact, I'm sure everyone at Pride Park would love him.
Yeah, no pressure, Carlton.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm also curious because you mentioned there possibly looking at bringing another striker, but you've got Salverson, who I think you signed in January, and DeJean Brown, who's shown some promise from the academy as well. Could we see Brown go out on loan if there's another striker coming in?
Yeah. I mean, I go back to last summer, and from what I understand, they wanted to loan him out, but couldn't get that last striker through the door in the final couple of weeks of the window. By January, that didn't happen for whatever reason, even once they got Salverson in. But yeah, I mean, from what I understand, I think it was Ali El Hamadi who was being linked on deadline day, and that fell apart. It's one of those deadline day domino effects, and there was no time to loan Brown out regardless by that point. But I think we'll see him. Get a loan. And yeah, so the links at the moment are for the man who started the Gold Cup final for the US overnight, Patrick Agyemang from Charlotte, who looks strong, wins his duels, wins a lot of fouls as well from what I've seen of last night. But he's quite raw, so might be a little bit Jerry Yates in that respect.
Do you think he could play as a second striker, Patrick Agyemang?
Theoretically, I mean, I don't know all that much about him. I think he could. I think you could see him. I think he's going to be malleable. They're going to be able to mold him and develop him. They're going to have a vision for that. I think he's going to make stuff happen, but I'm not sure he's going to get goals as of yet. His finishing, he's got 6 in 16 for Charlotte. He's got just under 1 in 2 for the US, to be fair, but he also misses a fair few from what I've seen. Relatively simple chances. But yeah, if you look at the Gold Cup final overnight, for example, he did a lot with very little service. Managed to drag the team up the pitch, and that is no bad thing. He's certainly got the physical profile for the championship. So if he does come in, it would be a big outlay. I've seen kind of $7 to $8 million banded about.
But do you know what, Jack?
A
Just
lot.
coming in on that, I think one thing I'd be slightly apprehensive about is if John Eustace has said he wants to play 4-2-3-1, and he's already made a big financial commitment to sign Carlton Morris from Luton Town, who I still think has reasonable stock from his seasons with Barnsley and Luton. I just wonder, is it worth paying whatever, is it like £5 million for $8 million, something like that?
Yeah, 5 and a bit.
Yeah, so it feels like a big commitment to have two strikers that would cost a lot for the club when they're competing for one position. Now, if Aggiman can play as in one of the three behind the striker in a 4-2-3-1, that obviously makes a difference. But somebody like Tyrese Doolin, I could see the logic behind the investment, because he, like Vyman, can play any of those four positions. But I think if you're only signing an out-and-out striker, then you've got to make sure that they're the number one if the investment is big.
Yeah, and I think this is why, in the back of my mind, they will have the 3-5-2 up their sleeves still. I don't think they're going to be closed off to that. But yeah, I mean, there must be a plan, perhaps to play him, as you say, behind the striker. Looking at even just some of the players he's statistically comparable to, there's a few on the list that I look at and go, yeah, they play kind of anywhere across the front four in a 4-2-3-1.
Right.
I mean, and then actually there's one from Championship here to give people a little bit of an idea that maybe don't watch much MLS like me before this rumour came out, quite frankly. The fifth most comparable player on FD is Tyrese Campbell from Sheffield United, which is an interesting one.
Interesting.
So yeah, I think, as I say, he's what, 23, 24? This is only his second full season with Charlotte's first team, having come through the college system and then played for their kind of B team for the first year. So as much as he's 23, 24, in kind of US MLS terms, he's quite early on in his development still at the kind of professional level. So yeah, but I think it's a big outlay. It's basically the rest of the cash-in money that they got up front. So yeah, it would seem a little bit odd to spend that much on a striker when you've already got Carlton Morris. So I would imagine there must be some flexibility in the way they're going to set up with him.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of remaining additions then, are we looking at another 4 or 5 signings, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if I just do some live maths, I'm just counting up the players in the squad at the moment. Yeah, so at the moment, there's a couple of spaces left in that squad, but I think there'll be a couple to go, definitely. And yeah, I think realistically we're looking at an extra forward, potentially someone like Ajiman, but I think left back, a 6, maybe even another centre mid on top of that, and a winger or two is what I'd be looking at. I think centre back wise, with Clark, Bart, Langus, Nelson to come back after the season starts, and Jake Rooney's still about as well, whether he goes out on loan or whether he's got a role to play. Fairly well covered. And yeah, I mean, I think it is. It's going to be people to play in those sort of wide, in that 3 behind a striker, the 6 and the left back. That's what I anticipate coming in. I think what we've seen so far is John Eustace doing certainly what he did at Blackburn last year, in taking some experienced free transfers, some experienced heads to build a kind of nucleus of a team, get a core in, and then he can start to add some, maybe a couple of exciting additions for abroad or a couple of Premier League loanees that naturally come later in the window. But here's some experience to shore things up to get this squad building process started, because it's yet another summer with a lot of turnover at Derby County, given 8 players out of contract plus all the loanees that left. So it's quite a big job. I mean, Derby's new home kit is based on the 95-96 shirt. Hence, they have launched it with the tagline "Regeneration." There's a fair amount of that going on within John Eustace's playing squad right now as well.
Absolutely. Expectations for the season then, Jack. I think certainly. I think when I think of Derby County at Championship level, you think of one of the bigger clubs in the division. And so with that comes a certain degree of expectation, but I also sense from the fan base there's a fair amount of realism as well about the challenges that the club's gone through over the last few years and the impact that's going to have on first team performance. So with that in mind, is it just about progress and stabilising in mid-table?
I think so, yeah. I think that's my kind of goal personally. That I'd be happy with that. I mean, John Eustace has reaffirmed that he is here for the next 3 years. The length of his contract as a minimum, and they want to build over that time steadily. He said at the fans forum a couple of weeks ago that the playoffs would be, an exceptional season. Basically, I think realistically, my personal goal would be if we could go into the final day knowing that we're safe. It'd be nice to have a final day for the first time in 5 years where we're not worried about something unless it's positive. Because, I mean, you go back, obviously, last season relegation battle, promotion, playoffs, administration, relegation battles. It's been a while. So I think, the last question at that fans forum was, can we have a slightly more relaxing season, basically? And Stephen Pearce, the CEO, echoed this question, to which John Eustace's response was, well, if you get the players. And I think that's what it's going to come down to. I think a little bit more good recruitment, and Derby can be a stable mid-table side as a minimum. And who knows? John Eustace has worked wonders before. I'm just cautious of going over the top. I think there's going to be some good foundations laid in the way he wants to play for the longer term now. And to me, that's what this season is kind of about. It's laying those long-term foundations as we kind of really continue to build from there. Because the kind of initial firefighting of his arrival in February is done, and here's the opportunity to build a team up in his image.
100%. What was I going to say? I'm glad you mentioned Stephen Pearce, because I was actually going to ask you about him as CEO, because he was heavily criticised during the end of Mel Morris's tenure, and he was, unless I'm mixing up with another person, I don't think I am. He was considered to be responsible for a lot of the mess that Derby County were in at the end of Mel Morris's era, and that David Clowes had to clear up. So are you surprised that that 3 years on, here we are, and Stephen Pearce is still involved with the football club?
I think there was initial surprise, definitely, and I think a sense that it was maybe something for the short term. But I think David Clowes must trust him, and he's proved himself to him. I think he's got a little bit of favour back with fans who were skeptics, because it's him who reportedly identified and pursued and secured John Eustace's signature. He's the one who made that happen, which I think that goes some way. But
Sure.
yeah, no, it's certainly something that would have been surprising at the time. I think now that's the day-to-day running, and he does a fair amount of that. But yeah, no, it's certainly one that divides the fan base, as I kind of diplomatically sit on the fence as much as I can.
Okay, fair enough. I've had to go Paxman on you a bit there, Jack. But you've, I think let's in terms of you mentioned there the expectation. So I'm doing my 1 to 24s in late July, Jack, and one of my processes for doing that this year is rating each team out of 10 on 14 different categories that I think are going to determine their fate. So what I'm going to do is shout a category at you, and you can give me a number between 1 and 10.
Oh wow! Okay, here we go.
All right. First one is ownership.
Ownership, I'll give them 8.
Yeah, 8 for David Clowes and co. Infrastructure.
They've done some good regeneration at Moor Farm, new pitch at Pride Park. It's good for the level. Again, I'll probably give it about an 8 again. I think they're pretty solid.
Okay,
I,
nice.
having been around more farm, it's in the last few months. I don't know quite what they've done recently, but certainly the training ground and so on is looking. It's been looking good, and reportedly improvements have been made as well. So, to be honest, I'm quite excited to go back when I'm next doing something there. Should be excited. That is the sort of sad thing that intrigues me.
No, absolutely. Yeah, hopefully you've got many more visits to those training facilities. Next one is playing budget.
Oh, see, this is hard to know because I don't know how much they've got. I'm going to sit on the fence here because I'm not sure. Do you know what? Give them that 6. I don't know. I don't know. Really how much there is. There's various different figures being banded about, but they must have. They say they've got a bigger budget than last year, and then there's the rest of the cash-in money. So I think they should be in a decent position.
Yeah, I would guess that it
important.
might be lower mid-table, so somewhere between 14th and 18th, possibly the playing budget. That
Yeah,
would be what I would guess.
yeah. In fact, that rating is probably about a 6 relative to what I think they should have and where they are relative to the rest of the league. That might be slightly lower.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That,
you can probably tone that down a little bit based on
okay,
judgment
yeah.
of the rest of the league.
Do you know what? I often do that when I'm putting together my spreadsheet. I'll look at what the fans have said, and I knock the ratings down.
We're looking at it from a different perspective, and that's the thing. It's getting the different, and that's what this whole format does so well. I think is bringing that all together over the course of pre-season.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. I appreciate that. Management.
Oh, I'm gonna give. You know what? I'm gonna give John Eustace a 9, but I'm biased. He was really nice to me. That helps.
That bumps it up from an 8.
Yeah.
No, I think that's fair actually to give John Eustace a 9. Goalkeeping department.
I'll give them a 7.
7.
I'm quite happy that I'm just, relative to the league, that I don't know quite where they are. There's obviously going to be some better goalkeepers and setups in the league. But as I say, from what I hear, highly rated goalkeeper coach down in there as well. That I think he's going to make a difference.
Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it? Defense.
We'll give them at the moment with the lack of a left back. I'll give them about 5, just because I think that's going to be a big factor. The lack of a left back and a little bit of uncertainty over whether we need another right back if Kane Wilson's going to play further forward.
So 5 for now, but with the potential to be higher with additions. Midfield.
Do you know what? I'll give the midfield probably. We'll give them a 6. We'll give them a 6. So I think midfield's solid, but again, a couple of additions. That 6 is still, ironically, that 6 is still needed to upgrade that rating. I think, but there's some good players there. It's just quite how it's going to all come together. I think at the moment. I think, as I say, there's a fair bit of business still to be done.
Attack.
Do you know what? Didn't score many last year, so it's difficult to give them more. I'll give them that 6 again. So I'm quite excited by what's been added, and again, that could easily, with a couple of exciting additions, that could go up to 7 a little bit higher. But for now, with what they've got, we've just got to hope that they live up to expectation. And I'm just cautious that not all too many of the players are proven to get many goal contributions based on having either not been at Derby before or records over the last couple of seasons.
Sure. Squad depth relative to this stage of the window.
But this stage of the window, I don't think it's bad. I think, given where they're going to be, as I say, 2 fullbacks both sides, 5 centre backs, need 1 or 2 midfielders, a winger, and then a couple of upgrades. They can have 7 for that. I think for this stage of the window, they're looking solid.
Perfect. Next one is squad stability. So sort of turnover of the squad, if you like.
Yeah, that's been quite high. I say over the last few years. I'll probably have to give that like an 8 because I look at this team. I look at even the amount of changes that I had to do from on my depth chart from the copy. I looked at the copy from this time last year rather than January. Just the
Yeah.
sheer number of changes. There's been a fair few, I can tell you that much.
So sorry. So this is squad stability. So it's sorry, I maybe didn't explain it properly. So this is the
on the
group
regular
of
scale, yeah.
the group of players. Yeah. So it'd be quite a low one, perhaps.
Yeah, quite low. Give it like a 2 or a 3. Yeah.
Okay. 3 for squad stability, fine. Next one is growth potential. Players you think are going to get better, basically.
I think so. I think we can give him like a 7 for that, because I think John Eustace has a record of getting a team to be greater than the sum of its parts, and I hope that's what we'll see.
But I suppose in terms of are there any young players? So, for instance, Liam Thompson might be one who you think he was okay last season, but he could really kick on this year. Are there players like that who you think who you'd say that about?
Yeah, I think Thompson definitely. I think we could see. I think we'll see more from Kane Wilson. I think we'll see more from Zetterstrom, hopefully, and I think Sondre Langas as well will have once fit again. Because when you play on a torn meniscus for a couple of months and need the surgery, it's going to take him a little while to come back. But yeah, kind of 6, 7. I think there's some growth potential there. But yeah, probably more like 6. I think they probably need that little bit more to come in. But the academy is very excited as well. That is slowly rebuilding, I would say, after the last few years with this restructure to hopefully bring some more of that first team thinking to the younger players. There could be potential for that to improve.
Team spirit is the next one.
Team spirit, I think that was very good towards the end of last season. We can give that an 8.
Lovely stuff. Fitness.
I think there are still some concerns here given the number of injuries last season. I think there will be some changes, but I probably struggle to give it more than like a 5. Kind of middle of the road, because the sheer number last year was crazy.
And finally, quality.
I think relative to the division, there is some good quality from where Derby are for a kind of mid-table finish. Compared to the teams coming down, it's not going to be really anywhere near. For where Derby are, it's probably about a 6. But relative to the division, I guess that might be a bit lower. But to be honest, you'll be a better judge of that than me.
I normally drop the ratings down when I put them into the spreadsheet.
Exactly. That's the thing. I'm fairly happy with where the team are, but relative to the rest of the championship, it probably is unfortunately still a bit lower, and it's maybe the other side of that halfway point.
So some final quick fire questions from me then, Jack, before we wrap up. What's the biggest reason to believe in Derby County right now?
John Eustace, I think, based on his track record.
Simple as that. Biggest reason for doubt?
The fact that there's still a fair bit of recruitment that needs to be done, and fears around injury records from last season.
Injuries want to avoid, hopefully. And finally, too early for prediction maybe, but give me a rough feel for where you think next season might be heading for Derby County.
For me, it'd be a great season if they could sneak into the top half, but I think that sort of mid-table stability and sort of being just kind of clear in the relegation battle at the end of the season, and sort of just mid-table mediocrity, as it's called, would be great. I would love that. I'd love to be chilled out on the final day and be able to watch all the chaos of the playoffs and the relegation battle
with the popcorn.
Without a care in the world.
Well, brilliant stuff, Jack. Thank you so much for joining us. Love your stuff on the Rams Review podcast on Derby County. So it's been a pleasure to pick your brains on the Rams. Thanks everyone for watching at home. This has been the EFL Debate Derby County Summer Deep Dive with Jack Bryan from the Rams Review. And we'll see you again for another Summer Deep Dive very soon.